Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. In the aftermath of a Ravens defeat, now watching these other 8 teams go at it here this week, I have tried to grab some guys that I didn't have a chance to get on during the regular season on a week-by-week basis. I've managed to collect a whole lot of people in the football space. Many of them will be visiting with us in 3 weeks in Atlanta for Super Bowl 53 as Luke and I are on the scene down there. I run into this guy at Super Bowls and Combines and other places. You can run into him out on the internet anytime. Follow him out on Twitter at FO_A Schatz. He is Aaron Schatz. He is the head of Football Outsiders, an ESPN NFL analyst, and you can find him at footballoutsiders.com as well. What is up, man? I didn't bother you during all this transition from a Flacco offense to a Lamar offense. I don't know what you thought of it at the time to say, hey, maybe this is a good idea or maybe this is a bad idea. But the analytics of all of it for me is that offense was in 2nd and 2 and 2nd and 3 so much that I know why it succeeded. And I see the Chargers game and they were in 2nd and 12 and 3rd and 14, and I know why it failed. But you break this thing down at a scientific level here, so I am delighted to have you on, Aaron. Happy playoffs to you and hopeless offseason to me.
Happy playoffs to you, my friend. Yeah, the analytics, our numbers were not as high on the Baltimore offense during the Lamar Jackson period as you might think. Part of it is they played a lot of easy defenses during that period, so they looked better than they really were. So we actually had their offense declining a little bit when Lamar Jackson was the quarterback, but their defense and special teams improved, especially defense, improved so much over the second half of the season that that's what really was carrying them to that 6-1 record over the last 7 games.
Look, we've talked so much about sustainability of Lamar Jackson and what this represents long-term. Harbaugh's about to sign on here long-term, allegedly. Everybody's in love, and they're going to kumbaya it and all that. I don't know from the outside if I were interviewing here whether I really believe I have a franchise quarterback or whether I have maybe a good thing as long as it can last. And, I heard the Chargers in the aftermath. I had Jenny Frentis on earlier this week talking about the second time you see it, there's a lot more you can do. And these are grown-ass men on these defensive sides who also run 4-3s and 4-4s, who at some point lived to stop this sort of thing and were embarrassed by how they played out in Carson a couple of weeks ago. I do wonder whether this is something that anybody else would be willing to bet on, because as the first round ticked off, no one wanted to move to a Lamar Jackson Navy-style total RPO offense, that there's something to be said about the way this works in the league and the way it's drawn up in 31 other places, that this is still a little wacky for guys like you to try to figure it out, right?
Yeah, and I don't think that this is their plan forever. My guess is that this is the offense that they felt that they could put in place to win with Lamar Jackson this year. I think long-term, my guess is that the goal is for him to be more of a standard passing quarterback in the NFL. You don't draft a guy in the first round unless you think he can pass the ball well or is going to grow into passing the ball well in the NFL. And so this is the short-term fix. I think the long-term fix is closer to what we see with a team like Seattle or a team like Carolina, where the quarterback running is still a large part of the offense, but not anywhere near the degree that Baltimore was doing it this year. We've just never seen an NFL offense where the quarterback ran as much as Baltimore did for the second half of this year. I don't think that's the long-term plan.
Are you surprised that it ran out of gas? I mean, certainly Vegas flopped on this game last week, and the whole notion that a kid starting his first playoff game, who's the youngest guy to ever do this, is going to beat Phillip Rivers twice in 3 weeks. There were some things in the aftermath of my purple enthusiasm. And, Aaron, I want to show you in the shot that I did get the purple rope lights at. I never got a chance to string them up because I didn't find them until Friday. But I was ready to go on the purple magic carpet ride of long offensive drives and short defensive stints and everything that sort of powered this thing. Even in the Kansas City game and sort of going out and slapping them around in Carson, you bought in a little bit. But in the end, the minute you get behind, you wonder what was going to happen. And certainly for the Baltimore crowd and booing the offense and Marty and Lamar and whatever it was sort of a call to, hey, let's not let Joe Flacco and a $25 million quarterback sit on the end of the bench here. And to our baseball fans here, Zach Britton the season away. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, Joe Flacco is going to be gone, and they're in with Lamar Jackson. And I don't know what this is going to look like this time next year in the playoffs if you get behind by 13 points and you can't throw the football.
Well, you have to be able to throw the football. In a way, that's what's the most shocking. The first game that the Ravens played with the Chargers was Jackson's worst game running the ball and best game passing the ball. So what I expected was that he was going to surprise people by passing the ball better than expected in this game. And for whatever reason, whether it's perhaps partly because of the playing 7 defensive backs or just the fact that because the run didn't work, they were constantly in bad down and distance situations, the passing the ball was terrible until the fourth quarter of this game. The defense showed up and did its job. Special teams had some problems. That was a little bit of a surprise, giving up the big return to Desmond King. But mostly, yeah, I expected better passing in this game because his best passing game before this had been against the Chargers.
Aaron Schatz joining us here from Football Outsiders. Tell me what you're doing. I know you guys ramp up for season. I see you at the Combine. I'll see you at the Super Bowl in a couple of weeks as well down in Atlanta. But you guys break down football at a different kind of level and look at the game differently. And you're one of the first guys that I ever met doing this back at the Combine 15 years ago and breaking into sort of the science of all of this for fans who want to take it to, let's say, the level beyond what the game shows show you on Sunday mornings, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's our goal. My goal was actually, it's really funny because I tell people, my goal was never to really improve the way football teams were run. My goal was to improve the way football teams were covered because I'm just a media guy at heart rather than, I don't work for a team or anything like that. But we just felt like the way teams were covered so old school 15 years ago, and people still, I still see it on Twitter this weekend, people talking about the team with more carries on the ground won the game in all 4 games this weekend. Well, yeah, that's because teams carry the ball when they have the lead and they're running out the clock. It's not the run that usually gets you the lead. It's usually the pass that gets you the lead and the run that solidifies things once you have it. And in a way, that's what's so strange about the Baltimore run that they went on when they were 6-1 is because they were so run-focused, which is just so different from the way things are generally done in the NFL now.
Well, we just hired the nerds from the Astros here, right, for the Orioles with 115 losses, and they're bringing in Astro Ball, and they're bringing in analytics, and we hear so much about analytics in baseball. And I know, for a fact, Eric DeCosta and everybody in the NFL is trying to crack some magic codes. I mean, hell, the Browns tried to hire Sashi Brown, right, and they brought Paul DePodesta in from the baseball side on an analytics side.
And in the long term, it worked. If you saw the 7-8-1 this year, in the long term, the Moneyball thing rebuilt the Browns. They are a much better team.
Well, and so we're all wondering how that relates to football and where we are. And I want to go to down and distance and what the Ravens' charts look like after Flacco got injured. And, the reason this thing worked is first down and the run on first down. No one could catch this kid for 6 weeks. And they're in 2nd and 3 and 2nd and 2 and 2nd and 4. And just at a straight blackjack table, Aaron, if you're getting dealt 20 every hand, you're going to win a lot of hands. And if you're in 2nd and 2 and 2nd and 3, you're going to keep the ball. And you're going to keep the other team's $25 million LeBron James off the court, off the field. And that's what the strategy was, and that's how it worked. And when that doesn't work and you find yourself with offensive linemen not hearing the cadence at home, holding penalties, you find yourself in 2nd and 20, that's a whole different place than 2nd and 2 when you're trying to keep your punter off the field, keep your defense off the field, keep their $25 million offense, or their $18 million wide receiver off the field. that was a strategy that I haven't seen any team in the history of the Ravens running in 2nd and 2 and 2nd and 3 consistently. Even in the era of Jamal Lewis, we didn't play like that.
The problem with the run is that a lot of the times you can try to set up, first of all, you're not going to get a lot of 7s and 8s. Even if you're running well, what you're going to get a lot of is 4s and 5s. You're setting up 2nd and 5, right? The other is a lot of times you're also going to get stopped, right? You mix the 7s and 8s with the 1s and 2s. So here's the deal, right? From week 10 onward, Baltimore averaged 7.3 yards to go on 2nd downs, and that was the second best figure in the league. But that's still 7.3 yards to go. It's not 2nd and 2, 2nd and 3. It's like they average 2nd and 7. So that's the problem with the run is that all you need is that 1 or 2 times that you get stuffed at the line, and that really puts you behind, and you've got to be able to pass on 2nd and 3rd down.
Aaron Schatz is here, Football Outsiders, always taking an interesting look at all things football. Trend-wise, in 18, I had our concussion specialist on from LifeBridge Health last week, that there's been less a concussion, less injury, less of a lot. And, hey, I'll tell you what, quarterbacks not playing last year, being a Raven fan, I went on the road and saw that act out in Green Bay with backup quarterbacks. And we played backup quarterbacks 5 out of 6 weeks last year to end our season. This year, all the guys are standing. Here we are in the playoffs, and even the Mariotas and the Winstons and these other guys had their opportunities to play and to be standing. And I know we saw the heinous injury to Hearns last week, but there is something about health and Carson Wentz notwithstanding, and Andrew Luck and where he is right now, that the better league is the league where players are healthy for everybody, for the Players Association, for these men, for their families, for their futures. I know it's a tough game and all that, but the league's better when there is a concern about trying to keep these guys upright, and it has totally changed the way the game's officiated, the way we watch it. I saw a defender kind of help a wide receiver through a route last week when the ball was underthrown as to not kill him the way Jack Tatum did. The game's changed a lot, and I don't know what that means from a trend standpoint, but it's probably going to help statistics of certain guys, not named Le'Veon Bell, who decide to actually show up and play, right?
Well, the offensive level, right? The offensive level of the NFL this year was the highest it's ever been. There's never been as much offense as there was this year, and there's 2 reasons for that. The first is what you're saying. The way that the rules have been changed to try to prevent injuries help offense. The second is there's never been a time in history where offensive coordinators have been more ahead of defensive coordinators as far as creativity. We have yet to see what is the big defensive response to all of the motion and the jet sweep motion and the moving players around and the flexibility of, moving tight ends around that we're seeing on the offensive side of the ball. And maybe what the Chargers did last weekend is the answer, but right now offensive coordinators are just far ahead of defensive coordinators, and you add that to the rule changes that make it hard to play defense, you get just more offense than you've ever seen before.
Well, I mean, in speaking to the Chargers and what was done there defensively, that was different. And we're going to spend the next 8 months talking about the Ravens getting out-coached in that game because they didn't have a plan B, and the fans thought plan B was Joe Flacco, who hasn't worked with the first-team offense in 10 weeks, which Brian Billick came on this week and said that probably wouldn't have been a very good plan either, down 3 touchdowns at that point. And Lamar sort of willed them back once the defense sort of fell back. But you talk about putting 7 DBs out on the field, right, and running around with a light package against a heavy running attack. That feels almost counterintuitive, but that's what Gus Bradley did. And we do remember back when he was a genius running around with all those genius defensive players in the Legion of Boom and all that stuff, that, Gus Bradley put together a winning game plan, and it was something that hadn't been done before, and quite frankly, something he didn't think of 2 weeks ago, right?
Well, the thing is, we think of Baltimore as a power running attack, and Gus Edwards is a kind of a more bowling ball runner. But their running attack was based on a lot of misdirection. When you base the running attack on the threat of the quarterback running, it's a lot more about misdirection than it is power. Like, I have a feeling that it'll be harder for the Chargers to play 7 defensive backs against the Patriots, because the Patriots' running attack is much more straightforward and just like pulling guards and running up the middle on you, and much less about the sort of, reading a guy and the threat of the quarterback running. There's no threat of the quarterback running with the Patriots. So it's going to be different for the Chargers this week.
Aaron, some thoughts about Joe Flacco and all of this and his value as you see it. You watch a lot more of the league. You've seen a lot more bad quarterback play. You mentioned the lack of mobility. Dude, Lamar Jackson got sacked 7 times. I'm not being mean about how bad he played or butterfingering the ball or decision any of that stuff. But he better never get sacked 7 times again. Like the one benefit to having him in there is you feel like he should never get sacked, right? And tip of the cap to the Chargers.
Mobile quarterbacks get sacked a lot. Like, I realize people think mobile quarterbacks shouldn't get sacked, but because they're trying to make something happen by getting outside the pocket, they tend to get sacked more than pocket quarterbacks do.
And that feels counterintuitive, but I know better in arguing with you about, statistics, damn statistics, and lies. I know you're factual on this. So some thoughts about this change, and if you're coming in to play head coach here, the notion of Lamar Jackson and what was done there versus what needs to be done traditionally, as you said, to sort of dial it back from the running and him seeking contact 15 to 18 times a week, right? Not to mention the 7 times he's going to get crushed anyway, running around against a good defense that traps him and pins him in when they get behind and they have to pass, and he's not very good at that, and the line's not very good at protecting him. Joe Flacco in all of this, I have a sneaking suspicion, man, the Dolphins or somebody are going to put a bunch of fat guys around him and draw it up and play it up and have a couple of receivers that he's never seen before, and he may find his creator in a second life, because I feel like he's got that kind of personality that he's got a little pissed off at what happened when he was playing pretty well. And I think if you go back and see how he played in September, when things are put around him, he could probably go win you some playoff games, man.
Well, here's the surprise, right, is that Flacco in the first half of the season had perhaps his best season in the last 4 or 5 years, right? He's been pretty below average by our numbers every year. And he was actually above average by our numbers in the time that he played this year. I was actually saying earlier this year that if Baltimore wanted to maximize this year, Flacco would have been better than Jackson. If what they want to do is build for the future, Jackson is the quarterback of the future, and getting him that experience is important. But for what they played this year, Flacco was better. It's just the defense wasn't as good when Flacco was in there in the first half of the season. But that's also a lot better than Flacco's been the last few years. So what are you going to expect from him if he gets to another team? A lot of it depends on what receivers that they put around him. I mean, John Brown was a big help, right? He's a real deep threat. So where does he go? If he goes to Miami, he's got Kenny Stills. That's a really good deep threat. He goes to another team, maybe he doesn't have the same deep threats. He doesn't have the same receivers. He goes back to being the guy who's really inaccurate downfield like he was the last couple of years before this.
Aaron Schatz joining us here from Football Outsiders at ESPN. You can find him out on Twitter at FO_A Schatz. That's SCHATZ. There's a little football there. And, hey, man, when are you doing some more late-night television, man? I mean, you work well in the comedy role as the Football Outsiders Almanac, you know?
I would love to do it. Hopefully next preseason we'll do another appearance. I again, doing the late night when I was on with Seth Meyers is one of the most fun things I've ever done. Definitely would be excited to do it again. I'm here if they need me. If any of those late night shows need a football expert, I'm here. But it's a battle. Listen, it's been a battle in the analytics world. I've been doing this for 16 years, and getting our voices heard on television. We're a lot in the newspapers now. We're a lot online. But on television, it's still a battle to get the analytic voice heard. I'd love to see one of the pregame shows, instead of having 5 ex-players and coaches, have 4 ex-players and coaches and 1 analytics guy, just to get that point of view in there.
Well, I mean, you always make good arguments on our programming here as well as at Football Outsiders. And, you know, for the players that the Ravens have here going into the offseason, Suggs, Yanda, Weddle. We know Flacco is going to, go over the side of the boat. And then the money that would be spent on a C.J. Mosley at this point, and where they are with Marlon Humphrey and having to plan for the future there, because he looks like an emerging star. But a lot of good players, a number one defense, and a lot of age, and a lot of directions they're going to go with new leadership with Eric DaCosta that they could go in, I should say. Where are you on, let's say, Suggs? Value to him for another team to come in at the end of his career and take him away for a year?
Yeah, I mean, he's still a good player, so there's value there, absolutely. But, how much do you want to pay for a guy that age? You've seen from Cameron Wake, you have seen an aged pass rusher continue to play into a really high age, but do you want to count on Suggs doing the same thing? He's pretty up there, but he had another good season.
Eric Weddle talked after the game about whether the team would want him back. He had the green dot at various points, C.J. Mosley as well. Mosley's going to be expensive, and I think there will be a market for him, and the Ravens have to ask how long, how much on C.J. Mosley, who by every account, and I've been around him for years, incredibly likable, the kind of guy you want on your team, the kind of guy you'd want to sign. But the question about his health and the actual what are we paying and what are we getting, which I think they still ask about Brandon Williams. I think they still ask that about Tony Jefferson. I think certainly with Jimmy Smith and with the secondary and where they are, where their money is going to be spent. And this is the first year they're going to live without the Joe Flacco, we have to pay a quarterback like a number one. They're going to save some money there. So this is the first time in a long time there's going to be some movable money, as well as some really veteran guys here that they have to make tough decisions on, and then those players have to decide whether they want to continue to play football. I sort of see the twinkle in Marshall Yanda's eyes that I would expect him to be back playing. He looked like he had fun this year. Weddle looked healthy at the end. But then there's the question of whether the team wants to pay them to come back next year.
Well, the other thing is with the Flacco contract is you're still going to have to carry a lot of dead money, even if you trade him. I believe that if you trade him after June 1st, it's an $8 million hit. If you trade him before June 1st, it's a $16 million hit. So there's some savings there, but you're still carrying some of that money. But, listen, every team runs into this where you have to figure out how to get everybody under the cap. And when you have a top defense with this much talent, you have to figure out how to get everybody under. The good news is that the highlight of this defense is secondary, and those guys are all still under contract next year. As far as I know, that's not where you have to make big decisions. I mean, yes, long-term about Humphrey, who was very good this year. You have to make a decision, but for at least one more year, you're good. So that being the best part of the defense, that should stay constant next year.
Hey, man, always appreciate your work. We're going to be watching playoff football here this weekend. Any thoughts about when we convene in Atlanta, who's going to be there? We're down to 8 here. There's certainly things to recommend and like all of these teams that are left. I mean, even the Cowboys, maybe. I don't know. But certainly watching these teams play over the weekend and knowing the momentum they have, as well as what the higher seeds have to offer. Pretty good tournament we have here. I really don't know who we're going to see. I know everyone thinks New Orleans is going to be the toughest out in all this, and I would agree with that. But, I wouldn't be shocked to see any combination here 2 weeks from now. I just hope it's not Tom Brady. for your New Englanders, that's my kick in your shins there.
Our numbers, there's a big gap in our numbers between Philadelphia and Dallas and the other 6 teams. Okay, the other 6 teams have been much better this year than Philadelphia and Dallas. A lot of just close, just sliding by victories for Philly and Dallas to get into the playoffs. So I definitely expect the NFC Championship game to be Rams-Saints. AFC is much more up in the air because of how hot the Colts have been in the last half of the season and how good the Chargers are. It really could be any of the 4 teams out of the AFC. But in the NFC, we have Philly and Dallas way behind the Rams and Saints.
My man, we'll see you in a couple weeks in Atlanta. If we don't catch you in Indianapolis, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you and hear your football expertise. Keep doing the great work you're doing out of Football Outsiders. We'll keep following along, all right?
Thank you very much. Probably see you in a couple weeks.
There he is, Aaron Schatz, joining us here from Football Outsiders and FO_A Schatz. Great follow. Tens of thousands follow him who love football, and you can as well at Football Outsiders and ESPN NFL. He's up in New England where they're playing football this week, and Man, I had the taste of the garlic bread from the North End on my breath and those cookies, Italian cookies up there. I was going to take a walk, romantic stroll with my wife out in the cold, as we always do in Boston. Was not meant to be. Instead, it's going to be Pizza John's Pizza out this week. I'm getting down to Back River Neck Road in Essex. You've seen the famous logo. I have not had Pizza John's in like 6 weeks. I'm getting the pepperoni. I'm getting the green pepper. I'm getting the mushroom. I'm getting ravioli and bringing that home. I'm getting a cheesesteak with provolone on that. Extra fried onions, extra mushrooms. I'm doing it up. The fresh bread. That's what I'm going to do for football this weekend. I've made up my mind. Also brought to you by our friends at Strategic Factory. They've made up their mind to get me some new gear for Super Bowl week, so I'm looking forward to that as well. Creating your masterpiece and doing all the things that they do for strategic marketing at Strategic Factory. If you need marketing gear, branded apparel, they are the folks you need out in Owings Mills. Also want to mention Drumline Live coming to the Modell Lyric, an international tour based on the historically black college and university marching band tradition. Bold beats, ear-grabbing energy down at the Modell. It's on the 17th. They've got room for you. Coppin State is our partner as well. I'm usually wearing my Coppin State hat, but I was wearing my Ravens hat here to talk to Luke earlier. But I have my Coppin State hat. I'll be wearing that. All the Coppin State games are on WNST from the gym over there. We're going to get out for a game later on. I'm going to get Juan on and D. Wayne as well. Appreciate their support and their sponsorship at Coppin State. But historically black college and university marching band tradition going on at Drumline Live. So sort of tying things together. I know Morgan and Coppin going to be supporting this on the 17th at the Modell Lyric. Going to be kind of neat. And I'm going to try to get somebody on next week from what they're doing at Drumline Live, because my wife loves Drumline. When we're walking through the harbor, sometimes the beats are out, and she digs that. So I might get her over to the Modell Lyric next week before the football games. We get a chance to do that. I just wanted to plug that. The BuyAToyota.com audio vault is there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. If there's any breaking news, we'll get that out to you first on the WNST Tech Service. That's all brought to you by Coons Ford and our friends Dennis with a requiem for 18 and more thoughts of wearing his Lamar Jackson jersey and how much fun the game was. Hey, it was a playoff game. It was home. It sucks to lose. We're all in agreement, but it beats the alternative not having playoff games in January. So I'll stick by that. I hope the Orioles offer playoff games. I mean, I have to chuckle, but we're wondering when that's going to happen. So we've had bigger problems than losing playoff games. So dust off, as they say. Shake it off, as Taylor Swift would say. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. Streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.